So for more on this, let's bring in James Freeman, assistant editor of the Wall Street Journal editorial page. He's also a Fox News contributor. Just want to put a couple of these numbers back on the board for people, just so they're eye-popping. Call for one. This is Biden's social spending plan would push inflation higher. 46% say yes. Hurt the economy. 42% say yes. That's a lot. And then the next one is, has inflation caused you financial hardship over the last 6 months? When you have a number like that at 67%, that seems to me that would make sense of why these poll numbers for President Biden are very bad, because so many people are feeling the pinch.
Absolutely. And when we saw that nearly 7% inflation number for last month, I think some people might say, why is it only 2/3? Inflation, as you pointed out, this hits everybody. You feel it in everything you buy. You notice it at the gas pump, the grocery store, et cetera. So that question on is the spending spree in Washington fueling inflation, this is the Joe Manchin argument, and I don't see how you can rebut it, because we are in this period, COVID and then post-COVID, of enormous federal spending, much of it funded by debt, and much of that debt bought by the Federal Reserve with money they create. So it is an inflation driver. It also juices the demand in the economy while supply is depressed. For whatever reason, a lot of people don't want to work or aren't back at work. So, yes, these spending sprees are an inflation feeder.
Yeah, I don't want to get well ahead of this, but you were on Tucker last night talking about the future of the Democratic Party and whether or not Joe Biden runs again. What Jackie just said there at the end of her live shot is quite telling about the politics of this. In our polling, among independents now, 1 in 10 say they're better off financially today than they were a year ago.
1 in 10.
90% of the people among independents are saying they're worse off. That is devastating when you're talking about the politics of selling your programs.
That's right. And so we've seen it's a tight labor market. You can get a job if you want it, but wages have not been rising at 7% a year. So that's why people have jobs. They may be getting paid more, but what's really going up is the price of things they buy. And that's where you see it in the polling. There's also, in the Fox poll, across the polls, there's not a lot of optimism going forward. Even people who feel like they themselves are doing well are not confident. And that's part of really the awful impact that inflation has. It makes everybody question everything. It's really, our currency is a bedrock of society. And when you can't depend on that, it makes everybody worried and anxious beyond the direct tax of having to pay more.
That's really important. It's a very important point that you just made. And I think that's something we should talk a little bit more about, is like the psychology of it all. I also wanted to point out this, just legislatively. So Build Back Better has been hanging out there for 6 months. Manchin has said from the beginning, I am not for this. Looks like now they've realized they are not going to get this done before Christmas. And there's a question, I think, of whether after the holiday they can even get it done. E.J. Dionne is a columnist for the Washington Post, said, he thinks that forget the Biden spending bills. He said, here's the quote, "It's time to make it all about democracy. Push the voting bills now." So they're going to try to figure out a way to just say the most important bill we could pass right now is not Build Back Better. It's the voting rights thing. They don't have the votes for that either.
Well, I think this goes to the credibility. We've talked about how both parties, people in the base of each party have grown more influential over time. And what we're seeing in the Democratic Party is this demand for bigger government. So, OK, we can't get the big spending bill. Let's go with the plan to federalize election law and have the federal government take over jobs that the states have been doing. I think a old-fashioned Chuck Schumer, maybe some years ago, he would have seen that big inflation number. He would have said, Joe Manchin, you were exactly right. We got to scale this thing back. I would have expected a new slimmed-down compromise plan this week, but there's no compromise. So let's just move on to the next.
Perhaps the headline of the day would be then, if Manchin says, I'm not budging on Build Back Better, and Sinema says, I'm not budging on the filibuster, that means Build Back Better and the Voting Rights Act are both dead in the water. That's 0 for 2, James.
Well, I know the White House may look at that as a horrible scenario politically, but it actually would be good for Joe Biden.
Right.
Because the table was set for him to have a wonderful, roaring economy. And if he just stops interfering, he will have a good story if he chooses to run again in 2024.
Oh.
There's the good news for the White House right there. And the good news is it's all in your benefit. Yeah.
Nice
Thanks,
to see you in
James.
person.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Kilmeade. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to click to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page. This is the only way that I know for sure that you're not going to miss any great commentary, any great news bites, any great interviews coming your way on Fox. You can get it all here on YouTube. So subscribe right now.